The world you know is changing. For decades, one currency ruled everything. One system controlled nations. $1 decided the rise and fall of economies. But today, the ground is shaking. A silent revolution has begun. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, BRICS, 5 nations rising with one voice, defying the old order, challenging decades of dominance. And you, yes, you are living through history. The rules of money, power, and influence are being rewritten right now. And if you don't understand it, if you don't prepare for it, you'll be left behind. Trump's tariffs triggered a chain reaction. BRICS nations are no longer waiting. They are building their own financial system, creating alternatives to the US dollar. This isn't just economics. This is power. For the first time in decades, America's grip is loosening. Trade deals are shifting. Alliances are changing. New digital currencies are emerging. The world is entering a currency war, and you're standing right in the middle of it. For decades, the US dollar has stood as the ultimate symbol of power, stability, and global dominance. It wasn't just a currency. It was the backbone of international trade, the standard for oil, gold, and commodities, and the reserve currency that nations trusted above all else. When countries traded, they traded in dollars. When central banks saved, they saved in dollars. When crisis struck, economies turned to the dollar for protection. But today, that dominance is beginning to fade. The rise of BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, has triggered one of the most significant financial shifts in modern history. These nations represent more than 40% of the world's population and control a massive share of global resources, manufacturing, and energy production. For years, they relied heavily on the US dollar for trade. But now, they're building a new financial system, one designed to reduce dependence on the dollar and give them more control over their economies. It started with energy. Russia and China began settling oil and gas trades in yuan instead of dollars. India explored using the rupee for cross-border transactions. Brazil struck deals with China to trade directly in their local currencies. South Africa pushed for regional agreements to bypass the dollar entirely. This isn't just about convenience. It's about power. By moving away from the dollar, BRICS nations are challenging a financial system long dominated by the United States and its allies. They are working on their own payment platforms, exploring blockchain-based settlements, and even discussing a joint BRICS currency, one that could eventually rival the dollar in global trade. For the US, this represents a potential loss of influence, unlike anything seen in decades. If more countries begin trading outside the dollar, demand for US currency could decline. That means reduced leverage over international sanctions, lower control over global markets, and a fundamental shift in who dictates the rules of the world economy. The signs are everywhere, from central banks stockpiling gold instead of dollars to growing trade agreements that completely exclude the US currency. What was once unthinkable is now becoming reality. The era of uncontested dollar supremacy is slowly being challenged, piece by piece, deal by deal, nation by nation. For nearly a century, the West, led by the United States and Europe, has controlled the heartbeat of the global financial system. From banking to trade, from oil pricing to international debt, Western institutions like the IMF, World Bank, and USvsBRICS dictated the rules of money. The US dollar stood at the center of it all, acting as the foundation of global trade, and the reserve currency trusted by nations worldwide. But today, a new financial order is slowly rising, one that challenges this long-standing dominance. At the center of this shift are the BRICS nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and an expanding list of partners, including countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iran, and Egypt. Collectively, BRICS nations represent more than 45% of the global population and now contribute over 36% of the world's GDP, surpassing the combined economies of the G7 in purchasing power. This growing economic weight is empowering them to break free from Western-controlled systems and forge their own path. One of the biggest battlegrounds in this transformation is cross-border trade. For decades, most international trade, especially in oil, gas, and commodities, was conducted in US dollars through Western financial institutions. But BRICS nations are shifting away from this model. Russia and China are settling a record share of their energy deals in yuan, while India has increased the use of rupees in trade with countries like Russia and the UAE. Brazil and China have agreed to trade directly in their local currencies, bypassing the dollar entirely. These moves aren't just symbolic. They represent a coordinated strategy to reduce reliance on Western financial dominance. Banking systems are evolving just as rapidly. BRICS nations are developing their own alternatives to USvsBRICS, the Western-controlled international payment network, to avoid being cut off by US sanctions. China's CIPS cross-border interbank payment system has seen significant adoption, particularly among Asian and African economies. Russia has built its own SPS network to replace USvsBRICS access after Western restrictions, and there are ongoing discussions within BRICS to create a unified payment infrastructure that bypasses Western oversight entirely. Oil deals, the lifeline of global trade, are also at the heart of this transformation. For decades, the petrodollar system ensured that oil was priced and sold exclusively in US dollars, reinforcing its global dominance. But today, countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are increasingly willing to accept yuan, rupees, or other local currencies for oil sales, particularly when trading with BRICS nations. This shift directly undermines the foundation of the dollar's supremacy and accelerates the diversification of global energy markets. These changes aren't happening in isolation. They're part of a coordinated global strategy to de-dollarize trade, banking, and energy flows, creating a parallel financial architecture where emerging economies set their own rules and build systems outside the control of the West. For centuries, money has evolved slowly, from gold coins to paper notes, from checks to plastic cards. But today, for the first time in history, we are witnessing a revolution in how value moves around the world. Technology is not just changing payments, it's reshaping the entire global financial system. At the heart of this transformation are digital currencies and blockchain technology, driving unprecedented shifts in trade, banking, and economic power. For decades, cross-border payments relied on traditional systems like stubble IFT and central banks. These systems were slow, expensive, and heavily influenced by Western institutions. But now, countries and corporations are bypassing outdated channels, using blockchain-powered networks that enable instant, secure, and decentralized transactions. This isn't just innovation, it's a direct challenge to the financial dominance of the West. One of the most significant forces accelerating this change is the rise of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. Nations like China, India, and Brazil are developing state-backed digital currencies to reduce reliance on the US dollar and modernize their economies. China's digital yuan is already being tested in large-scale pilot programs, with millions of transactions conducted across its domestic economy. Russia is rolling out the digital ruble, and India is rapidly advancing its digital rupee project. These currencies allow governments to settle trade directly, without intermediaries like stubble IFT or the US banking system, giving them more financial sovereignty and faster control over capital flows. Beyond government-backed currencies, blockchain-based payment systems are also transforming global trade. Technologies like RippleNet, Stellar, and decentralized finance, DeFi protocols enable instant cross-border settlements at a fraction of traditional costs. Unlike banks, which require multiple intermediaries and clearinghouses, blockchain executes transactions in seconds, verified transparently on public or private ledgers. For nations and corporations seeking alternatives to Western-controlled systems, this is a powerful tool to bypass dependency and sanctions. Digital currencies are also shifting the balance of energy and commodity markets. Oil, gas, and rare earth mineral trades, once dominated by the US dollar, are increasingly being settled in digital currencies or through blockchain-based contracts. For example, China and the UAE have conducted cross-border energy deals using the digital yuan, avoiding both the dollar and traditional banking networks. These shifts are accelerating the global de-dollarization trend and creating new pathways for countries to trade freely without US oversight. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum are playing a parallel role in disrupting traditional finance. While volatile, they have proven that value can move globally without central authorities. Bitcoin has become a hedge against inflation in countries with unstable economies, while Ethereum's smart contracts are enabling automated, trustless transactions between parties worldwide. For emerging economies locked out of Western banking systems, crypto offers a way to access global liquidity without restrictions. The rise of blockchain also introduces tokenization, converting real-world assets like stocks, property, and commodities into digital tokens tradable on global markets. This innovation has the potential to democratize access to investment, enabling anyone with an internet connection to participate in financial ecosystems once controlled by powerful institutions. Technology is creating a parallel financial universe, one that operates faster, cheaper, and freer than the traditional system. From digital currencies backed by governments to blockchain networks controlled by no single authority, global payments are evolving at an unprecedented pace, and the structures that once defined financial power are being rewritten in real time. For decades, the global balance of power was shaped by a handful of Western nations. The United States, Europe, and their allies dictated the rules of trade, finance, and diplomacy. The dollar was the foundation of global commerce. The IMF and World Bank set financial policies for developing countries. Western-controlled institutions determined who thrived and who struggled. But today, that system is shifting. Power is decentralizing, and emerging economies are stepping into roles once reserved for global superpowers. The rise of BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is at the heart of this transformation. Together, they represent more than 45% of the world's population and control significant portions of global energy, manufacturing, and natural resources. In terms of purchasing power parity, BRICS nations now contribute more to global GDP than the G7, a milestone that would have seemed unthinkable just 2 decades ago. These economies are no longer passive participants in the Western-led system. They are actively reshaping it. This decentralization is most visible in the realm of trade and finance. For decades, the majority of international trade, especially oil and commodities, flowed through Western financial systems and relied on the US dollar. But BRICS and their expanding network of allies are steadily reducing their dependence on Western structures. Countries like China and Russia are settling energy deals in yuan and ruble. India has started conducting cross-border trade in rupees. Brazil trades directly with China in local currencies, bypassing the dollar entirely. The inclusion of new members, such as Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iran, and Egypt into BRICS strengthens this trend. These nations collectively control vast energy reserves, strategic trade routes, and critical financial hubs. With these additions, BRICS is positioning itself as an alternative center of economic influence, challenging decades of Western dominance over the global flow of money, energy, and resources. At the same time, regional alliances are gaining strength. Organizations like the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA, are empowering African nations to negotiate trade deals on their own terms, reducing dependency on European markets. Southeast Asia, through ASEAN, has created regional banking frameworks that allow member countries to bypass the dollar entirely when settling transactions. In Latin America, discussions are underway about creating a shared digital currency for cross-border trade, further signaling the decline of Western financial control. Technology is accelerating this decentralization. Blockchain-based payment systems and digital currencies are enabling instant, secure cross-border transactions without relying on traditional banking institutions. China's digital yuan, India's digital rupee, and Russia's digital ruble are paving the way for direct trade settlements between emerging economies. These innovations reduce the influence of Western-controlled systems like SWIFT, giving developing countries greater autonomy in financial decision-making. Natural resources also play a critical role in this power shift. Emerging economies control significant reserves of oil, gas, rare earth minerals, and agricultural commodities. As the global demand for energy and technology-related resources grows, countries like Brazil, South Africa, and Indonesia are leveraging their natural wealth to negotiate from positions of strength. In a world racing toward green energy and advanced technologies, control over resources like lithium, cobalt, and rare earths has become a major driver of global influence. And these resources are heavily concentrated in the global south. Geopolitics is adapting to this shift as well. Traditional US allies like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are deepening economic and strategic ties with China and Russia. African nations are diversifying their partnerships, seeking investment and technology from India, China, and the Gulf states instead of relying solely on Western aid. Latin American economies are entering agreements with BRICS countries to secure infrastructure, financing, and energy security on more favorable terms. With more countries joining initiatives like China's Belt and Road, BRICS trade pacts, and regional economic frameworks, the global map of power is fragmenting. Decision-making is no longer concentrated in Washington, Brussels, or London. Multiple centers of influence are emerging, creating a multipolar world where power is distributed rather than dominated by a few. The world is changing faster than ever before. Economies are shifting. Technologies are evolving. Global power structures are being rewritten in real time. And in the middle of this transformation, your future depends on one thing: awareness. We are living in an age where the decisions you make today will define where you stand tomorrow. Those who see the change, understand it, and adapt will thrive. Those who ignore it, those who cling to old systems and outdated mindsets, will be left behind. For decades, the global order was stable. The US dollar ruled international trade. Western institutions like the IMF, World Bank, and WFT dictated the flow of capital. Nations depended on these systems to survive. But today, those systems are being challenged like never before. The rise of BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is reshaping global trade, finance, and energy markets. These nations are no longer following rules set by the West. They are writing their own. Consider this: for nearly 80 years, oil, the lifeblood of the global economy, has been priced and sold almost exclusively in US dollars. But now, major energy producers like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are openly conducting oil deals in yuan, rupees, and other local currencies. This shift directly challenges the petrodollar system, which has been the cornerstone of US financial dominance for decades. If you're not paying attention, you'll miss one of the biggest transformations in modern economic history. At the same time, digital currencies and blockchain technology are accelerating financial decentralization. Central banks in China, India, and Russia are developing state-backed digital currencies to bypass Western controlled systems. China's digital yuan has already facilitated billions in cross-border trade, while India's digital rupee is gaining traction in regional settlements. These tools are creating parallel financial systems where emerging economies can operate independently without relying on traditional Western banking. But awareness isn't just about currencies and trade. It's about understanding the shifting balance of global power. The BRICS expansion, which now includes Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, and Iran, represents a fundamental realignment. Together, these nations control over half of the world's energy reserves and a significant share of global manufacturing capacity. As they deepen cooperation, they're creating a financial and strategic ecosystem that operates outside Western influence. This transformation has implications for every aspect of life, from your job to your investments to your future opportunities. As power decentralizes, new markets are opening in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Innovation hubs are emerging far from Silicon Valley and Wall Street. Companies and individuals who adapt quickly are gaining early advantages, while those tied to outdated systems are struggling to keep up. Look at the technology driving this change. Blockchain-based payment networks allow instant global transactions without intermediaries. Decentralized finance, DeFi platforms are giving people access to banking services without traditional banks. Tokenization is turning real-world assets, stocks, real estate, and commodities into digital tokens that can be traded globally. These tools are dismantling barriers that once kept power concentrated in the hands of a few, creating new pathways for wealth and opportunity. However, awareness isn't just about spotting opportunities. It's also about recognizing risks. As financial systems fragment, volatility is increasing. If you're not watching where the money flows, you risk being trapped in declining markets or outdated industries. Traditional investments, once considered safe, may lose value faster than expected. To thrive in this environment, you need to stay informed, stay flexible, and stay prepared. The workforce is also transforming alongside these global shifts. Automation, artificial intelligence, and digital economies are redefining careers. Skills that were valuable yesterday may not hold the same weight tomorrow. Nations and companies that invest in innovation, technology, and adaptability are pulling ahead, while others fall behind. Your ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn will determine how well you navigate this changing landscape. The question isn't whether the world is changing. It already has. The real question is whether you're paying attention. Are you following the trends shaping global trade and finance? Are you learning how blockchain, AI, and digital currencies are redefining value? Are you watching where the world is moving, or are you holding on to systems that are slowly fading away? The people and nations who thrive in the coming decade won't necessarily be the strongest or the richest today. They'll be the most aware, the most adaptive, and the most prepared.